So it's been a little while since I've sat down and only talked about books. I think because it's my full-time job to do that, from working at a bookstore to then becoming a book publicist and now communicating directly with publishers, it consumes a lot of my day, which means on my free time and during my creative hobbies, I read, but I don't discuss. This being said, I've noticed this spring a lot of friends and colleagues expressing that they're in a reading slump. And personally, I think one of the best solutions for that is to read a small book. Small books don't get the kind of hype and recognition they deserve. It's really quite an amazing thing if an author can write a story with a limited amount of words that still sticks with readers and informs them and inspires them. It takes a lot of skill to do that. And so today, I want to show you a bunch of my favorites that I think you'll love. So starting off with my favorite one, it's actually called Love. I'll start off by reading the first sentence of the description and then get into it a little bit more. So this says, "Love is a fever dream of a novel about a young sex worker whose life blurs the boundaries between violence and intimacy, objectification, and real love." I actually have quite a few books about sex workers, most of them being anthologies and memoirs. And I'm quite interested in sex written, not in a way of romance or erotica, but the humanities and psychology behind it. And so a lot of the times, those books leave you with a feeling that's quite dreadful and sad. Sex workers really witness and experience a lot of evil, predominantly for men. Whereas I do find that the novel Love has a very satisfying and empowering ending. And just as a whole, it's very sexy and disturbing and gripping. It's one that I read front to back very easily. Next, I have The Hole. This is a Japanese translation. And again, I'll read the back really quick and then get into it a little bit more. So this says, Asa's husband is being transferred, and the young couple move next door to his family's home in the Japanese countryside. Asa tries to readjust to their remote rural lives until one day she comes across a strange creature, follows it to the river, and ends up falling into a hole that seems to have been made specifically for her. This book is slow burn and eerie, but includes a lot of metaphorical elements as well. And because it's a Japanese translation, there is folklore that's alluded to that you may not understand. When I finished this book, I did have to search up the meaning of a couple things, and it's because I just didn't know those parts of Japanese culture. I think it's worth noting because it's a pet peeve of mine when people write off a book and decide it's not good just based on the fact that they don't understand it. Because when you read enough translated texts, that happens more and more. There are naturally going to be cultural differences that you just don't inherently know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And discovering the meaning of them and doing that research afterwards can be a really fun part of reading. At least I quite like it, so I added this one into the pile. Switching over to a memoir, I have The Illiterate. Now, I picked this one up because I have a personal connection to it. The author writes about World War II, specifically Hungary and the revolution, which is the whole reason I'm here. My family immigrated to Canada during the war. It's a part of my heritage that I have a lot of missing pieces of. And so whenever I can come across literature about it, I tend to pick it up. And this biography in particular blew me away. There are 59 pages, and she manages to go from the beginning of her life to the end. She brings up a lot of complexities and nuance to the conversations around migration and language barriers as well. I think this book is incredible, and as soon as I was done, I started searching up other books she's written, which seem very hard to access just due to the fact that they haven't been translated into English or are just out of print. But if you can pick up The Illiterate, I highly recommend that. I'm just going through the stack randomly, and I was unsure on whether or not to include this one, but I did. It's called The Relevance of the Communist Manifesto. I picked this up quite a few years ago, and I wanted to read it because I wanted to learn more about communism, but wasn't really interested in reading the actual text at the time because, as we know, government and religious texts have an agenda and a bias and are not often based in facts. They're based on what they want from their societies and communities. And that I'm not trying to critique or attack. It's just a fact that religious texts and government texts have an agenda and have biases. They're often trying to erase certain kinds of people and certain histories. Like queer people have heavy erasure in the Hungarian government, but are in different ways also erased within North America. And, we're witnessing that right now in the United States. So circling back, the relevance of the Communist Manifesto. This is not a book that's trying to convince you that communism is better. It is just exploring capitalism and communism, their similarities and differences, and just acts as a book to educate you more on both. Do with this as you will. Okay, I'm gonna recommend a poetry book next. This one is called I Can Hear You, Can You Hear Me? This is one of my favorite poetry books, and I'll read a little bit of the back again, just so you get a better sense of it. Encounters across phone lines, over drinks, through walkie-talkies, and unspoken recognitions between queer bodies. These micro-narrative poems demonstrate what it means to be seen, just as much as they celebrate and grieve the connections that they illuminate. Intimate, nostalgia, and surprising. This book is so, it really fills my heart as a queer person who grew up in the countryside. There's a lot of through lines about nature and camping, mixed with transness and friendships. It's such a beautiful collection. And with poetry, I find that there's 3 sectors you can put books into. There is the more Rupi Kaur teen type of poetry that doesn't have a lot of visuals, but really emphasizes relatability and emotion. And then there's the complexities poetry, the kinds that are a bit hard to understand and almost require education sometimes. There's a lot of interpretive elements and inferring and deeper meanings. And then between those two lies the sweet spot that I personally really love. It's quite biographical and describes the scene setting vividly, describes the people involved and all of the emotions happening. There are often creative liberties with the line breaks and placement of words, but overall feels like something that anyone can read and anyone can understand. So yeah, I Can Hear You, Can You Hear Me? A beautiful, beautiful book. I'm gonna do another poetry book actually on that same train of thought, which would be A Brief Relief from Hunger. This book is so skillfully written and really realizes the author. I'll read the back again. This says, A Brief Relief from Hunger is a poetry collection about the yearnings of a young man, cocaine, human connection, fast food, and the ravenous world in which he lives. In Vancouver, the speaker binges Big Macs post-rehab, while others consume fentanyl-tainted drugs. Growling bodies are everywhere. I was fortunate enough to go to one of the book signings when this came out, and I got to hear a lot of these poems read live. One of my favorite ones is this poetic response towards cruel Facebook comments mocking overdose survivors, which is just, it's a concept I haven't seen done before, and the author does it in such a skillful, elegant way. So yeah, in general, this is a very powerful poetry collection. Next, I have The House on Mango Street. Now, this is one that I believe is taught in United States universities sometimes, but it's not taught in Canada. It's told from the perspective of a young Latina girl who is growing up in a low-income apartment and witnessing all the different kinds of people that live there and come through there. As you can see by the vignettes, her perspectives and stories are quite short, but also very realistic to the mind of someone that young. This book has the perfect mix of extraordinarily beautiful, rich in culture and joyous stories of community and connections with strangers, just as much as it does very disturbing and heartbreaking ones. It's really about the witnessing of all kinds of people. And when I worked at a bookstore, I felt like I was always recommending this one to people. So it's in the list. I'm going to show you a couple niche ones, and I won't linger on them for too long. This one's called Miss Film's DIY Guide to Film and Video. And it is kind of done like this zine. It's all hand scanned with typewriter font and really collaged together images. You can see one of the info sheets here. This book is just genuinely really helpful if you want to be a filmmaker. It talks about how to approach film festivals, the lengths that a short film should be versus a feature film, what's worth it equipment-wise, and how to budget that. Yeah, I just love this. I picked it up at a used bookstore and keep referring back to it. And for another niche one, I have Basquiatisms. This is just a tiny book filled with quotes from Jean-Michel Basquiat. There's another one that I have for Keith Haring as well, but I would say that I like this one just marginally better. He has some really interesting quotes on art, motivation, politics, and America. Okay, next, let's go back to a fiction work. We have Agua Viva. This is also a translated work, and I would say quite a feminist text. It's really about a woman and her internal thoughts on things like nature and time. It almost reads like journal entries, but has the elegance of an old-timey letter. Admittedly, this took me a little bit to get into. I was unsure if I liked it at first, but as she explored more of childhood links and body, femininity, and how it all connects to the earth, I found myself getting into it. Let's go through two more. One of them is Indigiqueerness. This entire book is a written interview. I want to give you a glance at the formatting of this book. So there are these really colorful pages with photographs scattered about. And in this book, Joshua Whitehead talks about storytelling, but through his individual lens of being queer and Indigenous on the Canadian prairies. Despite how small and short this book is, there are quite the variety of conversations. He talks about anime at some point and how essential it was to his identity development when he was young, but then simultaneously has some very interesting conversations on white gay men, how they tend to be femme-phobic and fat-phobic, and the pipeline that can lead into racism. So it's a really good mix of socio-political topics with very heartfelt and light ones. I think the last book we're gonna do, I actually do have more in this stack, but this video is getting quite long. The last one we're gonna do is Borealis. And I believe I've talked about this book before. It's an essay collection talking about what it's like being a Black lesbian in Alaska. I annotated the hell out of this book because right now I'm working on a project that's going to take me years to do with queer ecology and ecofeminism. And this is just kind of one of my resource texts, but definitely the most interesting one, despite being the shortest one. This author is so insightful, and I'm honestly in awe of her writing. There's one conversation in particular that really stuck with me, where she talks about the beach and how much she hates it. And the reason this stuck with me is because I love the beach. The beach is where I contain so many good memories in my life. It's a place that I go for joy, for healing, to relax, whereas this book has the perception of isolation and stress, even just being a black body on pale sand and what that does to someone's psyche. To parallel that, the author later talks about the night sky. It's part of why this is called Borealis. It's the oneness she feels with the dark and rich colors around her. And so, yeah, it just made me explore queer theory in a more intersectional way to do with things like colors or the textures of nature. Do you see yourself in it, and do you like what you see? And if I'm being completely honest, the reason I chose 125 pages for the number cap is because of this book. Borealis has exactly 124 pages, and everything else I showed you has far under that amount. So yeah, that is all of them. I don't know how many I showed you. I hope some of them sparked interest though, or at least got you thinking about potential topics and conversations you want to read about. In general, pick up a small book. They deserve more love. And with that said, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it, subscribe if you already haven't, and leave a comment if you want to chat. I will see you next week. Bye.